Out on a desolate highway in the Australian outback, two patrol officers wait by the roadside, ready to ticket speeding vehicles. An old pickup truck drives past them. The radar clearly shows the vehicle is not speeding, but the two officers exchange a glance, then hit the gas and chase after it anyway, forcing the truck to stop. The driver rolls down the window with a friendly smile on his face. He introduces himself as Mick, a hunter who spends most of his time in the wilderness. Faced with the officer's baseless accusation, Mick remains polite, repeatedly apologizing and explaining himself, but the officers grow increasingly aggressive, their words filled with mockery and harassment. They not only issue Mick an outrageously expensive ticket, but also order him to leave the area immediately. Their tone is full of arrogance and disdain for outsiders. The smile slowly fades from Mick's face, and he quietly accepts the ticket. He watches as the officers drive away arrogantly. Only after their patrol car disappears at the end of the road does Mick slowly turn his head and look at the rifle resting in the passenger seat. Meanwhile, the two officers are still celebrating their behavior inside the car, completely unaware that danger is already closing in on them. Moments later, Mick walks calmly toward the overturned patrol car with a can of gasoline in hand. He watches as the injured officer struggles on the ground in pain. Without any hesitation, he steps forward and breaks the officer's other leg. Then he drags him back toward the patrol car. He says something that fills the officer with absolute terror.
I am a pig shooter.
Next, he pours the entire can of gasoline over it. Mick stuffs the ticket into the officer's pocket. The officer continues to beg desperately.
I can make the ticket go away, mate. I can make you go away.
Flames quickly consume the entire patrol car. The scene shifts. A German couple is hiking through Wolf Creek National Park. As night slowly falls, they are left stranded in a remote wasteland with no cell signal at all. With no other choice, they set up a tent in an open area of the park. They plan to spend the night there and figure out their next move in the morning. While resting inside the tent, they suddenly hear the sound of a car engine approaching from afar. It eventually stops right outside their tent. Mick steps out of the vehicle and loudly questions them. He tells them this is a national park and camping here is not allowed. Faced with his questioning, Jack quickly apologizes. He explains that they didn't know the rules and will leave early in the morning. Mick then says he can give them a ride to a nearby town. He adds that if rangers find them, they could face heavy fines. Faced with help from a stranger late at night, Jack remains cautious. He politely declines Mick's offer and signals his girlfriend Jen to call for help. But it is already too late. Seeing this, Mick drops his act. Hearing Jack scream, Jen rushes out of the tent. Witnessing the scene, she charges forward in panic. Mick seems to enjoy her reaction. He grabs her by the hair and drags her aside. As a seasoned and dangerous killer, Mick has seen countless moments of life and loss. But someone like Jen, willing to risk everything, is rare. At that moment, he develops the idea of keeping her for himself.
Hey. Oh, look at that, eh?
In the end, Mick overpowers Jack and knocks him down. Mick quickly loses interest, so he renders Jen unconscious. When Jen wakes up again, she sees a horrifying scene. Mick is handling Jack's body not far away. Overwhelming fear surrounds her. Taking advantage of his distraction, she quietly slips out of the tent. Then she runs desperately into the nearby woods. But the noise she makes while escaping is quickly picked up by Mick. He gets into his pickup and follows calmly. To him, this is just the beginning of a twisted chase.
Fire up the ass! Hey, Where my bitch, eh?
Jen runs frantically through the dark forest. Eventually, she manages to reach a road. She flags down a passing off-road vehicle. The driver is a young man named Paul, a tourist from the UK. Seeing Jen covered in blood and unable to speak clearly, he doesn't hesitate and immediately lets her into the passenger seat. He removes the restraints from her wrists. Before Paul can understand what is happening, he sees Mick's pickup in the rearview mirror racing toward them. Paul instantly realizes something is wrong and slams the gas pedal to the floor. The off-road vehicle surges forward. A deadly chase begins on the empty highway. Mick drives while constantly taunting them. Using the vehicle's performance, Paul manages to create some distance, but Mick refuses to give up and keeps chasing them. Looking at Jen beside him, Paul finally realizes that this is no ordinary criminal. This is someone far more dangerous. Seizing a brief moment, he accelerates and drives straight into the vast wilderness without looking back. Mick's pickup is heavily damaged from the earlier collision. For the moment, Paul manages to escape, but he feels no sense of relief. He drives through the wilderness for the entire night. At dawn, he finally stops on a hillside. Paul lays Jen to rest with his own hands. But when Paul returns to the highway, he realizes he is already completely lost. The fuel tank is nearly empty, and the car won't make it much farther. Just as Paul begins to fall into despair, a heavy truck appears in the distance. Paul waves frantically for help, and the truck comes to a stop in front of him.
Hey! Oh, fuck me.
The driver is none other than Mick. Paul quickly jumps back into his car. At the same time, Mick starts his truck again, but Paul is only driving a regular off-road vehicle. In front of Mick's heavy truck, it's like a lamb with no chance to fight back. The outcome of this chase has already been decided by Mick. However, on a long uphill stretch, Paul finally seizes an opportunity. He uses a curve in the road to shake off Mick's truck, watching the truck fall farther and farther behind. A relieved smile finally appears on his face, but that smile lasts less than 2 seconds before something goes wrong. One of the tires suddenly bursts, and the car instantly spins out of control. Fortunately, Paul survives with only minor injuries. He crawls out of the wrecked vehicle and shouts taunts toward Mick on the ridge above, but the next moment, he is overwhelmed with fear. He turns and runs into the wilderness without looking back. Heading deep into the barren desert, it becomes clear that Mick let him go on purpose. For Mick, ending it quickly is too boring. He wants to watch Paul slowly run out of strength in this waterless, foodless desert, and break down in despair. Everything unfolds exactly as Mick expects. Paul wanders through the desert for an entire day. His water is long gone, and his strength is completely drained. In the end, he collapses on the barren land. When Paul wakes up again, he finds himself lying in a warm bed. A clean set of clothes is placed beside him. He was rescued by an elderly couple living in the desert. They found him unconscious and kindly brought him home. Paul devours the food on the table, believing he is finally safe. But this brief moment of peace does not last long. Soon, Mick's familiar voice is heard outside the house. He has already found them. Henry picks up his hunting rifle and walks outside. He warns Mick to stay away. For a moment, Mick backs off, but they don't realize this man never gives up halfway. This short-lived rescue is only the beginning of a greater danger. Believing Mick has left, Henry lets his guard down, but the moment he puts the rifle back, something goes wrong. Paul takes advantage of the chaos and runs out through the side door, desperately heading back into the desert. This time, Mick decides not to give him another chance. The chase continues from dusk into the deep night. In the end, Paul is knocked to the ground. Mick lashes him repeatedly with a whip.
Just leave me alone.
When Paul wakes up again, he finds himself tightly bound to a chair. The room is filled with all kinds of disturbing tools. At that moment, Mick slowly steps out of the darkness. Just as he is about to act, Paul suddenly starts singing an Australian nursery rhyme. Mick immediately becomes intrigued. He suggests they have a drink together. While Mick turns to get the alcohol, Paul quickly scans the room. His eyes land on a hammer on the table, but the cautious Mick only unties one of Paul's hands, just enough for him to hold a glass. After a few drinks, Mick suddenly proposes a deadly game. He will ask Paul 10 questions about Australia. If Paul answers 5 correctly, he can leave alive. But for every wrong answer, Paul will lose one finger. Since Paul is a top history student, he answers the first 2 questions perfectly. This both surprises and irritates Mick. But on the 3rd question, even though Paul gives the correct answer, Mick is still not satisfied. He never cared about the right answer. What he wants is to watch his victim struggle in pain. Ignoring Paul's resistance, Mick uses a cutting tool and injures one of his fingers. By the 4th question, Paul deliberately gives a wrong answer. He begs Mick to cut his left hand instead. Without much thought, Mick agrees. But Paul has already planned everything. He is trading one finger for the freedom of one hand. While Mick turns away again, Paul manages to grab the hammer from the table and places it within reach. He then grabs a flashlight and rushes out of the room, thinking he has finally found a chance to survive. He soon realizes something is wrong. He is inside a maze-like underground tunnel. On both sides of the tunnel lie numerous bodies. It's clear they all suffered terribly before. Paul's attention is drawn to a set of keys hanging on the wall. The next moment, he is startled and runs again. Finally, at the end of the tunnel, he sees sunlight shining in. But at that moment, Mick opens a cage in the basement. That so-called exit is actually a trap. Anyone who steps on it will fall into a spiked pit. As Mick gets closer, Paul hides behind a rock. He raises the hammer, ready for a final desperate strike. When someone approaches, Paul swings the hammer with all his strength, but he realizes too late that he has struck a woman who had earlier tried to call out to him. In that moment of shock, Mick steps out from behind him. When Paul wakes up again, he finds himself lying naked in the middle of a small Australian town. His body is covered in blood. Beneath him is a note that reads, "Loser, he survived." But the experience has completely shattered his mind. And the real killer, Mick, remains at large. He continues to hunt anyone who enters his territory in the Australian outback.
You